intro into this video. I want to get right into it with a blizzard update on timing and impacts and so much more, as well as the flooding rain likely on the southern and eastern end of this winter storm. Let's start out with alerts. You can see in the blues we've got winter storm watches, soon to turn into winter storm warnings. Probably right after I film this video we will see some of these change over. So this does include parts of central and eastern South Dakota. We have this as well as into parts of southeastern Nebraska, northwestern Kansas, as well as far northeastern parts of Colorado. But we've got that blizzard warning in that red color into parts of central Nebraska as well as southeastern South Dakota. This comes as the original low pressure system kind of helping out the system, bringing that southerly flow all the way on up into parts of central Minnesota with rainfall there. We've got this cold flow coming from northeast to southwest. That's increasing the snowfall chance with a brief 2 to 4 inches in some parts of South Dakota. But overall, this is the main event that's going to happen right as we go just beyond the white Christmas threshold, which is 7 a.m. on your Christmas. Once we get into the around 8, 9, 10 a.m., this is when that's really going to pick on up into parts of South Dakota as well as parts of Nebraska with heavy snowfall. And then, of course, that southerly push coming in from the east, that's going to kind of help to increase the ice line there on the system as well. Now let's get right into those really nitty-gritty details of this system. You can see we've got this cold air. Again, this first little batch of snow is going to make its way on off towards the northeast. It's going to be out of here by the time you're waking up on your Christmas as that low pressure departs and heads northeastward, attaching to a cold front that's in parts of southern Canada. As that does so, we're going to notice kind of a lingering little bit of light snowfall here into the evening hours of our Christmas Eve. As I'm filming this is Christmas Eve. Of course, Merry Christmas to everyone. But we're going to have this southerly flow into parts of Iowa, parts of Minnesota. Notice as we go to around 2 a.m., that's when at least some light to moderate snowfall starts to pick up with the secondary area of low pressure. But again, overall, this next area of low pressure that's going to create the blizzard is just not going to be strong enough really to bring enough snowfall by Christmas morning to have a white Christmas for most areas here that don't get snowfall with that initial strike. So here we go. Again, this is 1 a.m. Early in the morning, Santa's making his rounds as we make our way into our Christmas morning. This is 4 a.m. Hopefully Santa out of here by then, just in time for kids to wake up. But we've got snowfall here in parts of eastern Nebraska as well as central and eastern Kansas. And it will begin to start trying to get heavy at this point. But again, I think it's really going to be once we get past the 7 a.m. time frame that the main show begins. Look at this. This is 9 a.m. Look at how heavy this snow is. Far western Iowa as well getting in on some of the snow, but some of this will also push into parts of southeastern South Dakota. We're going to have the southerly push creating this ice line right along the borders of South Dakota and Minnesota, as well as the border of Nebraska with Iowa, and we'll see how this impacts places like Omaha, places like Sioux Falls in South Dakota. But also notice how this is all kind of happening because we've got this low pressure area kind of connected to this old front that's drifting on through southern Canada. That old front supplying some of the colder air on the northern end, but of course this is also creating that interaction that's going to result in some of that ice and as well as some of the gusty winds. So again, this is why this area is really where we're going to see the focal point for ice throughout the entirety of the system by the time we make our way. This is as we're heading towards 4 p.m. Central Time on your Christmas. So again, not waking up to a white Christmas, but by the end of the day you'll have blowing snow, whiteout conditions going on. So anywhere from around noon to 7 p.m. I think is when the worst impacts will especially move into parts of South Dakota. But also notice as the system kind of makes its way into the evening hours after sundown on your Christmas, look at how we're going to have that ice try to kind of progress to the northwestward as that warmer push of heavy rainfall moves through parts of central Minnesota. Even parts of eastern South Dakota might actually switch on over to some rainfall by the time we make our way towards around midnight, Christmas night, going into our Tuesday morning. Snowfall continues wrapping back around at this point, though, and eventually we might even see some snow showers in our parts of northern Missouri. Of course, hit that subscribe button to support the channel. But notice how the snow and the sleet just kind of continues here into the nighttime hours and pushes on off towards the west. So areas that see heavy snowfall during the day on Christmas into parts of eastern South Dakota as well as eastern North Dakota as well as northern Minnesota, this will pretty much turn over to ice and sleet if it wasn't ice or sleet to begin with. So keep that in mind. You might turn from snow and then get a layer of ice on top of it, which makes this just even more dangerous. Notice how some ice tries to filter into even central parts of South Dakota as well as Nebraska. And then also at the same time, by the end of the system into our Tuesday morning, some snowfall wraps back around into parts of Iowa. And even Minneapolis, Minnesota could get in on that cold air wrapping around the system and trying to bring in some sleet and some snowfall and some scattered snowfall and sleet showers there, so to speak. So again, this is what's setting this whole thing up. We've got this front drape like this. As we get that southerly push to come on in, we're going to really see this ice line develop, and this is what makes this system so dangerous. Look right along that state border there. We've got the ice at this point. We've got snowfall in that other zone that I just circled here. Eventually, the ice is going to take over a few of these zones that get the snowfall, so it's not going to be snow all the way through. Notice by the time we make our way, again, late Christmas going into our Tuesday morning, that's when that warmer air starts to surge northward into this cut-off low-pressure system, and that is why some of that ice forces its way all the way on up towards the Canadian border here and kind of pushes that snowfall off towards the west. And then, of course, as the system wraps back around, some of that cold air will actually filter under the system, which is why the snowfall could actually sink into areas that saw all rain otherwise with this event. Here's your forecast snowfall with the European model. Look at how that really totals on up. Again, it's looking like it's a little bit further west than what was initially being looked at, but overall, parts of central South Dakota as well as northern Nebraska getting in on 16 to 24 inches of snow in some locations. Overall, though, it's mostly going to be around a foot, I think, in a lot of areas. But remember, this is going to be blowing with 40-plus mile-per-hour wind gusts. This is what makes this system, again, as I've been mentioning, the ice concerns. You've got wind. This is a blizzard. We've got cold enough air into parts of Nebraska as well as northern Kansas to spit out some 6-plus inch snowfall totals there as well. And then into parts of northern Missouri and southern Iowa, at least some totals wrapping around close to an inch at the end of this system. And then in terms of your ice accretion, remember we're going to have blowing snow in some areas already. Then we're going to have ice falling on top of it. Most spots, I think, right up along, again, the South Dakota and North Dakota border along with Minnesota border, those areas. That's kind of where a lot of this ice is going to set up. Quarter to a half an inch of ice. Not enough for ice storm warnings necessarily for most communities, but nonetheless, this is a big problem. We're going to have slippery spots on roadways, and again, that ice progresses westward into parts of the central areas of all these states that see blizzard conditions eventually. So here are the wind gusts. This is what makes this a blizzard. Low pressure system developing by Christmas morning. We've got wind gusts 30 to 40 to 50 miles per hour on the southeastern side coming out of the southeast. And then on the western side, we've got those winds coming out of the north, fueling that cold snowfall, as well as the ice concerns, winds blowing 30 to 40 miles per hour in the morning on your Christmas over parts of Nebraska. Those winds only pick up as the day goes on, and by the time we make our way to 2, 3 o'clock Central Time, we've got some of these, storms and showers pushing through the Chicagoland area that could bring some 40-plus mile per hour wind gusts. But overall, it's these cells bringing the 40 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts that are going to be snow-induced that are going to be the big problem here over parts of eastern South Dakota and northern Nebraska. So I really think Christmas early to mid-afternoon and into the evening hours, that's going to be the worst impacts out of this system. But remember, we also get that ice to progress northwestward as the wind gusts also kind of filter in that direction. But again, in the area I just circled, that's where blizzard conditions are most likely, not to say they couldn't happen elsewhere. All right, let's get into the timing of the rest of this system, which includes heavy rainfall and the flooding concerns. Now, this afternoon, we've been seeing rainfall pushing through parts of the Arklatex, through parts of the southern and central plains, as well as heading towards the Midwest and Mid-South. Overall, these are the two zones that I'm watching this evening for flooding concerns, and especially that one down towards New Orleans, as well as parts of southern Mississippi, southern Alabama. That area, that's kind of where we could also see a low-end, severe weather threat. Can't rule out a brief tornado, but gusty winds would kind of be the main threat with this. As you can see by the time we make our way into the overnight hours of tonight, this is 2 a.m. So again, Santa making his rounds right into our Christmas morning. We've got this little cluster of storms down there into the Jackson region, and again, that's what could bring some damaging winds as well. We've got kind of some heavy rainfall pushing on through. Some of this heading on eastward towards Atlanta, Georgia, Nashville, Tennessee at this point, St. Louis, Missouri getting in on some heavy rain at this point. And again, this secondary low pressure is really the reason that all this rain makes it further east. So if you're not getting rain in the morning on your Christmas time, expect it to make it into your neck of the woods towards Appalachia, especially by the time we make our way into the afternoon. Look at how heavy some of these cells are, especially kind of repeating in some way, shape, or form, kind of coming out of the southeast and kind of banding over each other into parts of the Chicagoland region. At the same time, it's really coming down with the snowfall there, back on off towards the west of you in Chicago. And then look at this, into the evening hours of our Christmas, we'll have some gusty winds, some heavy rain over this region I just circled, including parts of the western Carolinas. We'll have rainfall continuing to push over those areas, and that could cause some flooding, especially up against the slopes there in western North Carolina. That's where a slight risk for flooding is also issued there. So again, that's kind of the secondary zone that we watch after that. Now anyway, Forecast rainfall through our Friday. This is the Weather Prediction Center. Now, most of this, of course, falling by midweek. Look at the totals in the parts of the Midwest. We'll see some totals. If it's not in the form of wintry precipitation, we'll get a quick 1 to 3 inches of rain. As well as in the parts of the mid-south and southeast, we get totals anywhere from 1 inch to 3 inches of rain there as well. But again, locally higher spots in those red colors, that's where we would anticipate really some locations to get closer to 4 inches. And again, that's why it's so concerning there along the Gulf Coast, up there in the parts of Iowa and southern and central Minnesota, and then there in the western Carolinas. Those are the main focal zones where it looks like the rain will really be coming down hard and heavy right now. So here's your main impacts by your area with the storm system. Again, blizzard in the parts of South Dakota as well as parts of Nebraska, snow in surrounding areas, and of course that ice in that pink shade. But remember, some spots that initially start out with the blizzard, you will turn on over to ice by the end of the system. Of course, everywhere Texas eastward, you've already seen rain in parts of West Texas with some of those severe storms you got yesterday. Parts of Oklahoma, parts of Kansas getting in on the rain, but the rain is going to be the heaviest here in the mid-south and the lower Mississippi River Valley, all the way on up into the Midwest in that little stretch. And then we've also kind of got that secondary area of heavy rain impacting Georgia and the Carolinas. Last thing I wanted to touch on here is your forecast temperature anomalies. As we make our way into our Tuesday this week, we've got some colder air. And again, this is what's really helping to bring that snowfall and kind of see some of that cold air sink under the system. Notice how the mid-south really getting cool by the time we make our way into our Tuesday afternoon. But otherwise, across the country, it's warmer than average along the west coast, the north-central tier, the Great Lakes, the northeast, the southeast, you name it. Still warmer than average for this time of the year at this point. But as we make our way to the end of the week, the entire southern and eastern tier of the U.S., still seeing that cold air sink under the system, and that looks like this could be kind of prolonged even towards the New Year time frame. Colder than average air, especially in the parts of the Gulf Coast, and especially including the entire state of Florida. The northern and northwestern tier of the United States looking to be a good bit above average, though, in the temperature department at that point. So it'll be interesting to see how this pattern could kind of bring increased snow chances further south into January. But, what I was just covering for you, there was that blizzard, and I hope you enjoyed the coverage, and I hope everybody has a safe, Merry Christmas. Please hit subscribe for more accurate updates.